The issue there is you don't learn anything from getting it right the first time, right? Or having what would be considered immense success. And I'll follow up on that. But you learn from doing, and you learn even more from, I'm not going to say making mistakes, but you learn more from not getting a straight line to whatever the outcome is.
Hi, and welcome to the Paying It Forward podcast. My name is Steve Richards. Thank you for listening. I believe if you want to attain a C-level position in your career, you need to understand what it takes to achieve that level of leadership. When you have access to successful entrepreneurs and senior executives who want to help you develop the skills and traits to become a great leader, it's like having your own mastermind group to mentor and guide you. In a nutshell, that's our podcast. In just a few moments, we'll sit down with Greg Lai. We will discuss his early dreams of becoming an astronaut to actually running his own investment firm. We'll talk about mentoring. More importantly, we'll talk about the things that you can take away to stand out, taking on ownership, responsibility, and accountability. The positive can-do attitude, doing more, not less, proving and asking for more. We'll talk about the biggest challenges he sees in today's workforce. We'll talk about communication, relationship building, networking, conflict and conflict resolution, self-awareness, and much more. My guest today is Greg Lai. Greg is a sometime author, speaker, and lecturer. He is the founder of Affinity Investment Advisors, an investment firm launched over 30 years ago in California. He's been blessed to have worked as a chemist, a parking control officer, a food technician, and a cast member. But after getting a degree in chemistry, Greg went back to school, embarking on an entrepreneurial journey that led him to Wall Street and back. More importantly, Greg is the proud father of 2 daughters and today supporting financial literacy through education and lecturing one person at a time. Greg lives out the Paying It Forward approach on a daily basis, helping build a legacy today for future generations. Greg is here today to share with you his experience, insights, wisdom, and guidance in the hopes that you can learn and apply key principles he's learned over the years. Greg, it is my honor to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
When you were younger, you had a dream. I don't know that it might have been parking control officer, but I am really curious about that transition.
I think my first memories of sort of what did I want to do was to be an astronaut.
Oh, wow.
Both my parents were college grads. My dad was a physicist, got a PhD in physics, and my mom was in math. But I think when you think about those times, it was really all about space and being an astronaut. My first job, I worked at a snack bar, applied to work at Disneyland. A friend mentioned that the city of Huntington Beach was hiring parking control officers.
What compelled you to go from all of that into investment management and starting your own firm?
I actually got a chem degree from UCLA, and so, again, I think it's that genre. Your parents want you to be a doctor, or they want you to go into the sciences, sort of follow. But for myself, I worked as a chemist for about a year, and I just wanted to have a career change. I wanted to do something different. And in fact, I was fairly frustrated, and so I didn't really know I would get into investment management. I just know that I needed a career change, and going and getting an MBA would sort of give me the foundation to make that change. And so I think as I thought about business school, I thought about what everyone thinks about is, accounting. I had taken some accounting courses. I want to be an investment banker or real estate. Those are the kind of things that you think about. I was a chemist, and when I was getting out, I thought I could be a payload specialist. So actually, the first job offer I got out of UCLA was to work for Aerospace Corp, to use those chemistry background and then potentially join the Astronaut program where you could be a payload specialist. Wow. And of course, in the 80s, there was the tragedy of the Challenger.
So along the way, moving from those 3 or 4 and moving into the business and going back to school, and did you have some mentors along the way, some people that sort of guided you or coached you, or did you just sort of kind of come to the realization, I don't want to do this, and I want to go here? Did you seek out anybody? Did you look for advice, or did you just kind of wing it?
Broadly speaking, my mentors have always been, the family, and particularly my 2 grandfathers. And so one grandfather was very entrepreneurial, and so summers I would work for him, and then the other grandfather, his passion was music, and he owned a music store in Honolulu, and so I used to work for him. And there's a lot of things that I remember them telling me that I remember today. When it comes to investment management, it's really something I didn't know anything about. I went to the Mirage School. There were some interactions with the school with a local firm here called PIMCO, pretty well-known money management firm. One of the other MBA students worked at a money management firm, and so he was maybe the first touch point to say, hey, here's this business. It's called investment management, and here's what I do. I analyze companies and stocks, and we manage people's money. That was my first sort of exposure to that. He may have been a mentor. He was older, and he sort of opened up that world. Over time, my career, I've been very lucky to have senior people help me and guide me and empower me really to expand on my career. When I did get this job at PIMCO, that sort of started my career. My boss was the former CIO of Pacific Life, had moved over to PIMCO. He was a mentor to me inside the firm. I got a good handle of what was occurring inside PIMCO through my relationship with him.
What sort of things did these mentors kind of help you or do for you as you were progressing through?
Well, the great thing at PIMCO, and to some extent my experiences as I've gone along the way, is that there are people inside these firms that are entrepreneurial, and I know that word's sort of broad, but they think like owners, and they're vested in the success of the firm, potentially beyond their own personal gain. And so, to the extent that there was communication and transparency, where these mentors could help me understand what the shared vision was, at least from their perspective, how I could be involved, the opportunity to do more, or to what I call jump into the breach. The people there were very open to saying, hey, if you see something or if you believe in something, you can own that. And so I didn't feel restricted. I could do more than what I was tasked to do, and they embraced that.
Now you own your own firm. So when you're hiring people, and granted COVID is COVID, so hiring might be semi-restricted or maybe on a pause right now, but when you hire people or you're promoting people, what are you looking for?
Well, I think that's changed. I think when I first started building a business, and even when let's say you come out of business school, I think business school is an interesting experience because you learn a lot of book skills and you meet a lot of people. In fact, I think the most important thing as you go through opportunities like that is to expand your network. You think early on that you're hiring for talent or qualifications, or you have a role, and then you're trying to understand who would fit that role. And 9 times out of 10, you're looking at their experience and you're saying, did you do this before at your previous job, and things like that. I have changed my thoughts and ideas about that. I think the success of a firm and a business has a lot to do with the people. So today, when I look at hiring or promoting, I try more to move away from my preconceptions on sort of what their talent and skills are, and start to lean heavier on, do they fit culturally? Are we like-minded? And how we see the shared vision, our energy, our effort, our willingness to communicate with each other. So I think culture is a big factor, because it's the personal interaction, and it's the people that drive a business. So you'll want to make sure that you can work with those people. Today, it's really about who the person is, how they treat people. Maybe that's something. How they accept collaboration, things that will help an organization succeed. Because I think the overemphasis on your qualifications and your talent, I don't know if this is the right word, but it becomes more transaction. You do this, and then we pay you that. Right. Versus expanding beyond sort of what we're going to do in our jobs, quote unquote.
How does somebody today, if they want to move forward, get promoted, how do they stand out? How do they provide that value? How does that person get ahead? What should they really be focused on?
We want people to kind of own their actions and be accountable. So thinking like an owner is the one thing. And particularly if in our situation, if it's a private company and it's fairly flat, you don't have a lot of employees, you kind of want everyone to sort of think like an owner and to some extent be able to understand how all the other people work, what their roles are, so that you can work easier as a team and even at times be cross-trained. I like people who come with a very positive attitude, sort of a can-do attitude, ones that want to learn, and that learning takes sort of a commitment. And so I know when I was successful at PIMCO, part of it was just coming in early and staying late because the opportunity to be called upon to do more rather than less, an openness to do more. Sometimes I hear people today, well, that's not my job description, or that's someone else's job. I don't have time. Those are the things that sometimes prevent you the opportunity to prove yourself or grow beyond what you're doing just right now in this moment. And so those opportunities to sort of prove to the other people around you that you can do more, and even maybe ask to do more. One of our senior principals, when we started the firm, she started really as the receptionist, and then moved on to get her CFA, to take on more roles, responsibilities, and ultimately to become a portfolio manager. But she asked to do more. She was there and willing and able. That's something which helps you get more comfortable with promoting someone to take on more responsibility and to do more, because they're willing to do more.
So we hire somebody, they come in, and as long as they take ownership and responsibility and accountability for day-to-day tasks, stay within but really stay outside the job description, put in that work, the initiative, drive, get hungry, ask for more, things like that. That seems to me kind of how you're thinking, if I came close. Okay. So what is the biggest challenge you see today? I see challenges of, it's not my job, it's not my description, but I want more, and I don't want to do any more. So I see less initiative. I see less initiative from people who want more but aren't willing to put in the time, effort, and energy to go get more. So I'd be really curious what you see as the biggest challenge with today's employees.
I take part of the responsibility, so it's the challenge is not always on the employee side.
Okay,
We as a generation have a certain communication pattern. So one of the challenges is to understand how to communicate with this new generation or people that are not inside your generation. Either they think our words are coded or we think our words are coded, and that means something. So one challenge is to try to communicate or learn how to communicate in a fashion that doesn't raise that resistance or create an environment of dissonance because someone thinks you're saying something and take it a different way. So there's a lot of personalization, I think, in the interactions that we have. I think patience is not as much as a virtue. Maybe people think they're missing out. We sort of use this word called FOMO, fear of missing out. So communicating with those employees is not easy. It's difficult. That is our biggest challenge. When in one case we think our words are empowering, the person receiving those words thinks it's critical. You're criticizing, something like that. So communication is the biggest challenge.
How important is relationship building?
It's very important, right? And that's sort of what everyone says.
Right.
But what is a relationship, right? So if you're you're on LinkedIn and you want to LinkedIn everybody, and you have thousands and thousands of relationships, I'm putting the air quotes
Right.
around that, then I don't know if that's as effective. And is that really in a relationship? I find for myself, I don't want to say a limited number of relationships, but understand that if I'm going to have a relationship, it needs to be real. I may not be able to help all the time or invest everything in that relationship all the time, but when I make the investment, it's real and it's genuine. If you can listen and you can invest in a relationship, then it's very valuable.
Along the way, there's got to be moments where we misfired on communication, we do the flyby, or someone didn't listen or hear it, someone didn't recap what they thought. Could lead, may not be, but there's some level of conflict resolution. How important is it for people to be able to deal with conflict resolution in the workplace?
Again, this may be my own perception. I sort of feel that today, getting into any type of conflict is not good, or
Right.
feels uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than maybe before.
That's probably true, yeah, given today's society, yeah, you're right.
So there's always conflict avoidance. Conflict can be viewed many ways. As you know, every situation is different. I do think the basis of resolving those conflicts is being able to commit to listening to the other person, outlining what you think you hear, what is it that they're really saying, and then committing to finding a win-win. And I know that's cliche, but finding an imperfect, perfect solution, right? And, and I think what happens today is it's sort of, my way or the highway. And there's a lot of winning, I guess, in the sense that if I get my way, then this happens, as opposed to a shared vision. So our team, we went through some leadership courses, and we centered around a book called Tribal Leadership. A big part of, I think, the takeaway from some of those exercises is self-awareness. You can all point to who that person is in the book. Hey, he's that person. But the bigger lesson and the bigger takeaway, which allows you then to function and react more appropriately, is to understand who you are in that matrix. And so it's not necessarily being judgmental, but having some self-awareness that then you can throw something into the pot as part of that negotiation or conflict resolution, because you are very self-aware about how you are. Then that allows someone else to throw something into the pot. One of the things I try to live by, and I think it's difficult for young people sometimes, because to get power, you have to give power. And to some extent, people look at organizations as a hierarchy, and so those that have power are only the ones that can give power. That's not necessarily true. But the ability to empower someone by actually giving them the control or the opportunity to make a decision, I see sometimes, though, people shy away from that because then they don't want to be accountable. So that's where the conflict occurs.
So you touched on leadership. What do you think is the most important quality of a leader? And then I'll ask you to actually tell me what your most important quality as a leader is.
Well, I think you have to be positive and optimistic as a leader. You have to be able to inspire people to share the same vision that you have. Now, like I said, you have to be self-aware. You have to be maybe even pragmatic to understand that there are real fears or there are real concerns that you have to work within. So I'd say the first thing is some positive attitude and optimism. And then I think, like I said before, you have to be able to give power to effectively lead people to a conclusion or to a goal. Many people, and I know my first version of Affinity, it sort of felt like, well, there's Greg. Greg's out front. He's the leader. And then my view, which was very self-unaware, was that I'm going to take these people kicking and screaming, right? And that's more of like Greg's the boss, and then we'll just do what
Greg wants,
says, right?
Yeah.
Versus, and this is different now, is if I'm the leader, then how do I create an opportunity for everyone else to succeed? How do I create group esteem versus setting something up where individual people have their individual esteem, right? And this is something that I really believe in. And so I think a leader needs to not only disperse and distribute his successes across his team, but he also needs to convince his team members that they need to do the same. And so you go from singular success in an individual way to group success. And that's far more valuable, it's far more fulfilling, and you can go to much further heights if the whole group feels good. And the reason for that is because then in any individual act or action, that person has the confidence. He knows he has the support, and he knows how that feeds into the group's success.
I sort of look at you as you're this quiet, humble leader who just empowers other people. You hold people accountable and responsible, but at the end of the day, you share that where we're going as a group, where we're going as an individual. You have an open door. You do let people come to you. You do talk to folks on a regular basis about all kinds of things, because any one individual person's success inside your firm is Affinity success, i.e. Greg and team. To me, leadership, if you're doing it very well, is almost so natural it doesn't even feel like you're leading. You're out there on the front, you're pushing, you're driving, you're motivating, but at the end of the day, people follow leaders. Leaders don't pull people. How about your most important leadership quality?
Well, and I think you've touched it. That is critical because if you have to pull them along, then I think there's a loss of fulfillment for them. Then they're doing it for you versus doing it for themselves. Hopefully, if they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it because they see the benefit for all of us as opposed to one of us. And I think if you can do that, now that's obviously difficult because we are humans, and the other side of the coin is you can't expect everyone to sort of sacrifice completely. They're people and they have other concerns. In fact, I'm learning something new too as I think about an organization, and I can't remember if I read this from the LinkedIn guy. I think it's Reid Hoffman. But when we think about leading our people towards a goal inside the firm, we have to balance that with sort of taking time to look at each individual and potentially understand that they need to build other skills that they need and other things that fulfill them, because they may not work at your firm for a whole career. They may be moving on. And so part of responsibility, I think more so with the great corporations that we see today, is it can't be too centric to affinity, if you will, or too centric to the business. You have to really get inside the team and say, well, here's something that you can do for affinity, but what is it also you want to do for yourself? And so if they can fulfill some of their own personal goals and be even more successful, even if that's not with affinity, that's really the goal.
If you could send a message to yourself from today backwards to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self? What do you wish you'd have known when you started out, or how would what you know today may have changed anything along your path or direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. So given my chemistry background and to some extent, I think sort of how I am, I sort of always believe there's sort of a cause and effect. And if you can affect all the causes, then you'll get the outcome.
I like that.
And I balance that out with some of the things that my grandfather used to tell me, which is, it doesn't matter whatever you do, do it to your best ability. So it's that conflict of sort of trying to figure out how you're going to maximize or optimize sort of all these things. So that's very, I don't know if that's left brain, but it's very mathematical. Like, here's all the inputs, and then I tweak all the inputs, and here's the outcome. So that's how I was when I was 29. I sort of said, look, here's all the factors, and if we do it this way, we're going to have a huge amount of success. I think it's actually the other way around a little bit. And so here's what I tell people is and again, this is not an original thought by me, but there's really three states of mind, if you will. There's what you know, right? And people are very comfortable with that. There's what you don't know. People are very comfortable with that, right? And then there's this whole world of what you don't know, you don't know. And I would tell myself that I will thrive and I should spend more time, and this could be viewed as either curiosity or being more open-minded. But the Ubers of the world and the iPhones of the world and all these great things that we see today could have only been born out of people seeking and living and thriving in this third state I called what you don't know, you don't know. And it's hard to be there, to sort of embrace, well, I don't know, and so I'm not going to go there. But I do know this, and I'm going to go there. That's actually, in my space, in investments, we see that all the time. People want to invest in things that are going up. They know it's going up, and they're going to invest in that.
Fair enough.
and actually, though, the greatest innovation, and if you can thrive in that other third state. So I would tell myself not to be fearful and not to be overly confident and not to be overly mathematic or overly model-driven. Try to live and try to thrive in that other state.
So we've talked about ownership, responsibility, accountability, initiative, staying hungry a little bit on the last part, curiosity, acting like an owner, not just relegating yourself 8 to 5 and doing what's inside your job description, thinking about going above and beyond whenever called upon or whenever felt upon, maybe not even being asked. Are there 2, 3, 4, 5 things that people should do today? And I keep focusing on this group between 25 and 40 where they want to get ahead, but then there's this whole societal impact, things that you described that they may not be doing. But if you said, hey, look, bottom line is this. We're going to finish our last 2 sips of this iced tea and we're going to get out of here. But before I go, I want to tell you this.
Wow.
And it could be do's, it could be don'ts. It could be don't overestimate, don't underestimate.
Definitely, perfection is the enemy of everything. Trying to be perfect as if there was a perfect outcome, right? So that's number one. I think young people, there's I guess a state of winning, whatever that means, or a state of success and sort of doing it perfectly. The issue there is you don't learn anything from getting it right the first time, right? Or having what would be considered immense success. And I'll follow up on that. But you learn from doing, and you learn even more from, I'm not going to say making mistakes, but you learn more from not getting a straight line to whatever the outcome is, right? And part of that is because all those other things that you learn on that kind of winding, meandering road is going to serve you well further on in that state which you don't know, all those things, all those skills, all those building blocks. So if you don't get a chance to sort of build that foundation by quote unquote making mistakes or learning along the way. The other thing too, at least in my life now, is as we get older, this pursuit of success. In investments, it's pretty clear. People are looking at each other's bank accounts, or they look at someone else and they say, well, I want to be like that.
Right.
The problem there is time goes by so fast and you're sort of looking to create success that's not your own, but someone else's that you see. And the problem with that is that's not even real, because most people only tell you the good stuff and don't tell you sort of the other stuff. So there's this false narrative about what success is. So I guess, again, people have to be happy, and that's a tough word, in finding their own way and not comparing, if you will, too much to what other people have or what other people do, or maybe that's another term for sure the grass is greener on the other side. It's not. You have to live in your moment and understand there is a beauty in that path, and if it's a struggle, it's only a struggle now because that will lead to other things in the future that won't be as much of a struggle. So it may be something else that I would say to people. And again, I wouldn't have said this 10 or 20 years ago, maybe, is that being different is better than being the same. And the way things are today, as we sort of look out, and whether it's a job you do, and I'm on the investment side, and so I sort of look at it through that lens. But being different is of high value. If you're going to be like everybody else, then you're sort of competing with everybody else, and you're delivering what everybody wants. But the true value is being able to deliver something that people now want and maybe didn't want before. So thriving and surviving in areas that aren't really popular right now or aren't quote unquote successful right now. So being different is good. Embrace being different and embrace doing something that other people aren't doing. I know that's difficult, but that's something that I think about.
That is great advice. Actually, I liked all three of those. So is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to make sure you get across to our audience?
Well, one thing that I have been more successful at as I've gotten older is ego does play a big role. And I know it's easy to say, hey, check your ego at the door. If you can do that, if you can sort of put other people first, try to have a servant's attitude. And I know that's very, very difficult. I think you can thrive. People will understand your true intentions as a servant, and that servant mentality. I think that is something that we didn't necessarily talk about, but have woven through all this. That's the other side of sort of checking your ego at the door, right? You can imagine that if you have a big ego, then everyone's trying to serve you and placate your ego.
Right.
I think I have been in more successful situations when I was able to sort of take a breath, take a step back, look at the situation, and then understand who we needed to serve in that situation, right? I think of that is something that'll be very valuable if you can make that assessment when you're in an environment, a group environment. I've been in many board meetings, and I think when I was younger, I think that setting would be like, hey, Greg, let's get in there and show and prove how awesome you are.
Yeah, well, I think that's the younger self, right? I mean, I do think that's very true. I think it's interesting because I've had several folks along the way use the word servant and leadership and sort of drive toward serving others in your career. And it all comes back to you. This was great, Greg. So one last question for you. We do this thing called 1 minute with our guests. So it's 1 minute with Greg. Looking ahead in your world, what down the road has got you excited?
Well, I think we're going to enter into a great period of time where, particularly in the U.S., there's a huge investment in what's happening here. So if you think about the space program in the 1960s, I think we're going through that period of time now where there'll be a lot of investments that are made in innovation and technology that will really accrue to the benefit of humanity, if you will, and maybe even specifically, the U.S. We are going through a period of time where that investment's being made and maybe wasn't made before. But pretty excited about the future of innovation and how so many examples where technology has disintermediated what would have be considered supply chains. Uber is a great example. You will see more of that. There is more of an embracing that there is a better way than the current way. That's fantastic.
So if a listener wants to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Right now, the best way, and I think there's value added in it, is through LinkedIn. And in our space, the investment space, I do a fair amount of informational interviews, and people can learn about sort of my trials and tribulations.
Final parting thoughts.
My last comment is my passion now, too, is financial literacy. Finances is such a big part of what our interactions are, either day to day with our spouses, with our children, with our workmates. But if I can leave people with sort of a visualization that if you invest early and often, it should be as easy as breathing and walking. Sometimes you have to think about breathing, and sometimes you have to think about walking. But long-term financial literacy will help you get comfortable with investing, and that is something that I'm really passionate about.
Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
He is Greg Lai, sometime author, speaker, and lecturer, and the proud owner and founder of Affinity Investment Advisors. And as Greg suggested, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. This information and more is in the show notes section of this episode on our website. Simply go to www.lessonsfromthecsuite.com/episode 2. You can follow our podcast for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Libsyn, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast player. If you happen to think this is a 5-star worthy podcast and you leave a written review, I'll be sure to mention your name in an upcoming episode as a small way to say thank you. If you're not yet following this podcast, please go to www.lessonsfromthecsuite.com, sign up or subscribe, it's free, and you'll receive a PDF on various ways you can pay it forward every day. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, any guest suggestions, or any feedback in general, please send us an email at feedback@lessonsfromthecsuite.com or go to our website and submit a message directly. Thank you for listening. Until next time.